All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jasper van der Marel. I'm from the Netherlands, and yeah, today I'm going to talk about cross-chain atomic swaps in Grin. I first learned about the existence of Wimble during testnet 1, basically at the beginning of the year, and really interesting project. And at some point, I decided to, try out and make these atomic swaps. But first, let me give a general introduction. So, mainnet Grin is approaching pretty fast, which is really exciting, and we kind of hope that at some point an economy will form around Grin, and you have miners that mine the blocks, and at some point they probably want to sell those grins, and then you have people like you who are interested in maybe want to play around and buy some, and at some point you hopefully have real economic activity, basically consumers. So there needs to be a way to exchange Grin to other cryptocurrencies. And yeah, so there are different types of exchanges with different types of technologies. There's basically yeah, like a scale of or a spectrum of centralization. So basically on the left you have the fully centralized, and on most right you have the decentralized. And let's start from the left. You have these big exchanges. Well, you probably know them. That yeah. So the upside of those types of exchanges is that the trades are instant, and you have high liquidity. You have all these advanced trading options. But I think also a big downside is that you have to deposit your coins, and at that point it basically becomes an IOU that you have to hope that they still have your coins by the time you want to withdraw them. And as we've seen from history, there are many problems with that. Yeah, although Mt. Gox, etc. And even the latest one was in September, the latest hack. So it's kind of a problem. And in addition, these exchanges have to comply to all these regulations, and they have to do KYC. So you have to give up all your information, your address, and all this stuff, which is in some cases not ideal. And so if we move to the right on this spectrum, you have more, well, you have the non-custodial exchanges, just at Shapeshift and Changelly. They allow you to have a greater control of funds, but they're still somehow centralized. And even now they have to comply with these government regulations. And all the way on the right we have these on-chain decentralized exchanges such as 0x and Ether Delta, which are pretty nice because they allow you to keep full control of your money. But the downside is that they all happen on-chain. So basically it's a smart contract which you engage with to trade with other people. So you get somewhat of an anonymity, but everything is on-chain and the chain itself is public, so not really anonymous. And in addition, trades are pretty slow because you have to, create a transaction, and it has to be mined, etc. And due to the fact that it's a smart contract, it doesn't scale as well. And we don't have smart contracts on Grin, so this is not really possible. And well, another big point is that it's mostly on the same chain. And of course, we want to exchange with other cryptocurrencies. And so a new technology, or relatively new technology, is basically these cross-chain atomic swaps, which are yeah, basically also on the right, and they also allow you to keep full control of your money. They can be fully peer-to-peer. I mean, you and I could, if we wanted to, swap between Grin and Bitcoin, for example, without any other third party helping us. So it's also more anonymous because no one else has to know that we are doing this trade. But on the downside, trades are pretty slow. They can take up to 24 hours sometimes to complete or fail, which, yeah, it's a downside. All right, so let me now define what is actually an atomic swap. Well, the name basically says, so if we take all the terms from the right to the left, we have first a swap. It's basically a trade without any intermediary party. Atomic is basically, it's an all or nothing transaction. Either both of them happen or neither of them happens. So it's basically one operation that it's quite atomic. And cross-chain, well, quite easy, it's between different cryptocurrencies. All right, so just to give a brief history of the atomic swaps. I think the first proposal was in 2013 by Ter Nolan on the Bitcoin Talk forum, and he proposed a scheme to do this, but it had a big problem that there are no refunds in case of one of the parties stops collaborating, and then basically your money is stuck on chain forever. So at some point there was a Bitcoin soft fork which enabled a new opcode which allowed you to implement these refunds with a time lock. And roughly a year ago, the first atomic swaps with Bitcoin were performed. I think in September, roughly, you have the Litecoin and Bitcoin atomic swaps, and then a bit later, Ethereum and Bitcoin. So how these atomic swaps with Bitcoin work is basically using HTLCs. HTLCs are, well, the full term is hash time-locked contracts. Basically what this means is, suppose Alice has some Bitcoin and Bob has some altcoin, and they want to trade. So basically what first happens is Alice generates some secret value, we call it Q here, and then she calculates the hash of Q, and she actually locks her Bitcoin with this hash. So, and by basically supplying this hash and Bob's public key at the same time, or a signature, sorry, from Bob, he can unlock this Bitcoin and receive them. And in addition, Alice can also get a refund if enough time has passed. And once Alice locks this with this hash, Bob is now safe to do the same thing, basically lock the altcoin with the same hash. And so if Alice wants to claim these coins, she has to reveal what Q is to everyone, so also to Bob. And so once Alice claims the altcoins, Bob can claim the Bitcoins. So what is important here is that both of these locks have a time lock, but it's important that one of them has a longer lock time. The Bitcoin has to have a longer lock time because Alice takes the altcoin first, and you don't want to have the situation where Alice can take both the altcoin and her own Bitcoin back, of course. Yeah, so these kind of swaps require time locks, which Grin also has, so that's okay, but it also requires hash pre-images, so you need to be able to calculate on-chain the hash of Q, which is not possible in Grin for a good reason. But yeah, so we have to think of another scheme to do this. And in addition, both sides of the swap are linkable because they're both locked with the same hash. So an external observer can see that they're both locked and know that those parties are doing an atomic swap. So we have to think of something else, and I'm going to explain to you now how this works. And at some point it might be a bit too technical. If you don't fully understand all the math, it's okay, but I hope you get the general message. So there are basically 4 steps to our process. First, okay, so we have a similar situation. Alice has Grin and Bob has Bitcoin or Ether, and they want to trade. And so first, Bob generates a secret Q, which is basically just a large number, and he locks the Bitcoin or Ether in a 2-of-2 multi-signature using both Alice's key and using Q as a secret key, basically. So instead of doing a hash, you use it as a secret key. And of course, you also have to refund. And secondly, once Alice sees that this has happened, she also can lock Grin. I have to remember that building a transaction in Grin is interactive, so she has to cooperate with Bob to form this multi-signature. And in addition, they have to build a refund. The third step is basically they have to spend this multi-signature, Grin multi-signature to Bob, but we have to make sure that at the same time that they're building this transaction, also they have to somehow reveal this queue to Alice so that she can claim the Bitcoin. And then finally, the final step is just claiming it. And I'll go through each of the 4 steps in more detail. Okay, the first step is that Bob locks his Bitcoin or Ether or whatever. The way it works in Bitcoin is basically pay to script hash address. That's basically the hash of in particular this script. And in order to spend this, the party has to provide the correct signatures as well as the script. There are many for any multi-signature contract or script on Bitcoin is basically of this type, pay to script hash address. So what Bob does is he submits this agreed upon amount to this address, and the output can be spent either if she knows the secret, or Bob can get a refund after 24 hours. And in the case of Ethereum, this is really similar, but instead of a script, it's just a smart contract. Okay, the second step is that Alice and Bob work together to lock the grins in a multi-signature. And you have to remember that there are no scripts and transactions are interactive. And so basically outputs are, as you've seen before, are Peterson commitments. They have this shape where X is the secret key or the blinding factor and V is the amount. But now the trick is that X is basically consists of 2 terms. Basically you have this XA plus XB, and only Alice knows XA and only Bob knows XB. So combined they know the whole thing, but neither of them knows both of them. Yeah, there's kind of an extra complication with this, that since any new output has to contain a range proof, which is kind of problematic because normally it requires the knowledge of this total secret key, but neither of them does. So you have to do some interesting stuff to replace this by some interactive process, and they can work together to calculate this range proof. It's maybe too detailed to explain how this works, but it works, thankfully. And yeah, so and then of course there's this second complication that once Alice sends these grins, it's now locked in this thing, and if Bob stops cooperating, well, you're basically screwed. So yeah, the solution is basically to, at the same time as you're building this multi-signature transaction, you also build the refund. So you're basically safe to do this. And this is another interactive process which requires a couple of steps. And then this refund has a time lock, so it means that this transaction cannot be mined into a block until this time lock expires. So the third step is, as I said before, is now they have to work together to spend these grins that are locked in the multi-signature. And as you've seen from Michael's presentation, that in general, if you build a transaction, it has to balance out basically. So if you take the sum of inputs or sum of output minus the sum of inputs, has to be some excess value, which is this X, or these X terms, and the amount part basically has to be 0, because we want, I mean, any transaction is not, we have to make sure that no new coins are created. So in this case, this part is known by the receiver and the other part is known by the sender. And like was explained before, that the nice thing is that we have this Schnorr signatures, and basically both the sender and the receiver can generate partial signatures for only their contribution. And by adding those signatures, so these signatures are basically a number and a public key point, and by adding them, you generate the total signature. And we basically use this fact. And in our case, we have this multi-signature, and then we create a new output that is only controlled by Bob, of course. Now we use a trick called adapter signature, which is basically a modified signature. I think it was first invented by Andrew Poelstra. And basically the idea is that Bob will just calculate his normal partial signature like before, and call it SB here. But instead of sending SB, he just adds the secret Q to this thing and sends that instead to Alice, and basically send this adapter signature. Now Alice can cryptographically verify that what she received is in fact the sum of this signature plus Q, but she doesn't have enough information to find Q. But she knows that if she writes her own signature and gives it to Bob, Bob can finalize the transaction and calculates this total signature and submit it to the chain. That means that well, Bob has received his Grin. And in addition, Alice just waits for the transaction to appear on the Grin blockchain. And at some point she sees her output being spent. And from this she learns this total signature. But she already knew some of the other components, so she just has to make a simple some simple arithmetic to find this Q, this secret value. And then she can use this Q to submit a transaction to the Bitcoin blockchain and claim the Bitcoins. And at this point the swap is complete. Now that's all nice in theory, but let's do it in practice, I guess. And that's what I did. Around a week ago I did the first Bitcoin Grin atomic swap. Thank you. So on the left you see a block explorer. This is basically the final transaction, so spending the multi-signature. You can look it up afterwards if you're interested. And on the right side we have a block explorer for Grin, where we did the same thing. We spent this input. One thing I particularly like about this is that from this block or this transaction you cannot see that what actually happened here is an atomic swap, because it just looks like any other input and output. While on the Bitcoin side you have a bit more information, but it's way more private than before. And the same principle works for Ethereum, but like I said, instead of a script you have a smart contract. You do the exact same process. And here you see the final transaction that submit to the smart contract, and the smart contract destroys itself and then sends the ether to Alice. And on the other hand you have the Grin parts. And so I mean, if you want to verify this, I mean I put all the numbers on the blog post somewhere, and I think I link it at the end, so if you're bored one time you can verify that I actually did a valid swap. Okay, so the code for this is public. I posted it on GitHub. It's basically a proof of concept written in Python that can do these kinds of swaps, and unfortunately requires a bit of communication. You have to do 4 round trips, so from the seller to the buyer and back. That's 4 times. Okay, you can see here it's basically a script you call, and then it tells you each step what you have to do and what you have to enter. So it's not the most user-friendly thing, but at least it works, and we can go from here, I guess. And yeah, that's basically it. So I put some additional reading material and the code if you're interested in running it. Maybe wait a few days because I have to update the documentation, but yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, let's put it back on. I think there were people taking photos.
Okay. I think anyway the slides will be online, so you have time to look it up on your own.
As we know, atomic swap is asymmetric. That means that if you compare code from one chain and another chain, it will be different code. I mean, if we will see script or Solidity code, can we actually exchange two Grin-based or Mimble-Wimble-based blockchain between each other, or it will work only between script chain or Solidity chain and Grin-based chain?
In principle, you can also use a similar scheme to do atomic swaps between other implementations of Mimble-Wimble, yes. But I didn't do that. Maybe at some point somebody will, but yeah. Technically it's possible.
Why are you using multisigs on the Bitcoin side rather than regular HTLC?
Well, because in order for an HTLC atomic swap to function, you basically need to be able to do these hash pre-images. Let's see. You have to be able to calculate on chain what the hash of Q is, and that's not possible to do inside Grin. So doesn't work.
Any more questions? Cool. Thank you very much. All right. So now we have a break until. Are we doing on time? Perfect. 45 minutes until 8:45. Grab some food, drink, and then we're back with John Trump going into the details of proof of work.